On today's show, the Milwaukee Bucks still undefeated in Las Vegas after a big second half to beat the Phoenix Suns. MarJon Beauchamp tops 20 points again. What are we seeing from him early in Summer League play? Also, Adrian Griffin. I didn't ask you about the new Bucks head coach, Frank. Are we seeing anything with the way this team is playing that might translate to a new style for the regular season Milwaukee Bucks? And also, Chris Livingston officially signed a deal, so we can discuss that as well. Plenty of news as Summer League rolls on.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work at ESPN alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. And as always, including on the weekend for the post-game show, we appreciate the support Monday to Friday, and anytime we drop an episode of Locked On Bucks, you can support us even further by subscribing, following, leaving a review, a rating, commenting on the show, and telling us what you want to talk about or what you're seeing from the Milwaukee Bucks at Summer League so far. I don't know historically, and honestly, I didn't go back and look it up, Frank, but it feels like the Bucks don't generally win in Summer League too often. So the fact that they've won the first two games feels like a little bit of a novelty. But both of these games followed a similar path. The Bucks didn't look great overall in the first half, and they used a monster third quarter to beat the Phoenix Suns. 84-75 was the final there. We started with MarJon Beauchamp in the last podcast, but I think, again, that is probably the place to start here. We spoke about the aggressiveness and, again, his ability to actually play in control, get to the free throw line. He finishes with 20 points and he's a team high plus 11 in his 31 minutes. Pretty efficient from the floor, again, even if he didn't shoot that well from the outside. But I thought this was a pretty nice carryover, and it wasn't perfect, but I thought this was a pretty nice carryover from game one for him in terms of his ability to attack the basket, finish around the rim, get to the free throw line. 8 free throw attempts in this game. So overall, I think we've seen positive progress from Beauchamp, even if it is just Summer League.
Yeah, I mean, I think consistency is, kind of the thing that stands out. And, we talked about last year, he had some slow starts. Game one, slow start, and then really came around. Game two, I mean, he had a big second quarter. He had 13 points at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a much, certainly a much more consistent sort of even performance. Although he could have, I think he had 20. I don't know if he scored in the fourth quarter. Maybe he had like 2 points fourth quarter. Like it was, he probably could have had a much bigger night than just the 20 points he ended up having. But I think the kind of what stands out is, 7 to 13 from the field. He was 50% in the first game, better than 50% in the second game, only 2 turnovers. So I think a lot of times, the way guys stand out is they get a lot of points, but they miss a lot of shots or they turn it over a ton or whatever. And they're not necessarily very efficient with, using possession. So the fact that he's, kind of stayed within himself and been able to be aggressive, with the exception maybe the start of game one, and really kind of let the game come to him. And then, when he's had the ball, he's going to his left a lot. That that's kind of his preferred route. Is he's getting chances in pick and rolls. It's not like he had some transition opportunities for sure, especially in the first game. But he's creating a lot of these shots for himself, which is we always see that, right? A lot of times when like wings or centers, bigs like don't do well in summer league, it's like, well, their guards aren't giving them opportunities. And it's not like Nico Mannion and Jay-Zan Gortman and Omari Moore are like just handing him all these free buckets or something like that. Like he's having to go out and make baskets and make opportunities for himself. And I think he's got like 5 and 1s through 2 games, which I think you hit on it. Like the free throw attempts as a rookie were very low. So the fact that he's been getting the line here in Vegas, I think, is an encouraging sign. So I think the thing that, again, for me is just kind of what I want to see is, playing with aggression and doing it consistently, and not just doing it to doing it, not just, like we said, kind of just like hucking up shots just to get shots up, but doing it with a sense of purpose. And, look, obviously it's not like it's going to be his role during the regular season to go out and like create shots from nothing. Like that's not expected, but I think this is kind of the thing, right? Like, you got to get confidence somehow. I mean, he alluded to starting to feel like he belongs, starting to feel like, yeah, I mean, he can be a really good basketball player in this league after game one. And I think for him, he's kind of a quiet guy, hard worker, doesn't always look the most confident. I think you hit on that as well. And so he looks like a confident guy right now. And I think that's important. And again, it's just all about kind of just building that capacity, getting that confidence, carrying that confidence over into training camp. And again, but hopefully he first carries it over into games, 3, 4, and whatever else kind of comes in Las Vegas. Because again, the consistency, if you can kind of just do it repeatedly, that's when I think you really start to notice. Being able to do it like, every other game or something like that, or put up points, but be super inefficient. Like, we've seen that story before, right? Whether it's, I was looking at stats from prior Bucks players kind of every year over the past 15 years in Vegas, and Jordan Nwora put up a lot of points to Vegas ago, but wasn't efficient at all. Ironically, Lindell Wigginton was probably the most efficient and highest volume guy last summer. Ball was always in his hands, right? He was kind of controlling his own destiny. But for the most part, I think MarJon compares really favorably with all the other guys we've seen come through for the Bucks in their second years, including Giannis. Giannis, 18.6 points on 57% true shooting in his 2014, his lone summer league. That was in his second year, going into his second year. MarJon so far, 24.4 points per 36 on 59% true shooting. So just keep doing that. I think we're all going to come away feeling like this was a successful summer league. So hey, maybe he can have give us a 30-point game or something like that. Like we maybe get a little greedy, Kane. But certainly an encouraging start from him. And again, I gotta put it in context. Like, not the first Buck to put up these kinds of numbers, but if you can keep doing it, like the consistency of the volume and the efficiency is I think what's really encouraging.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like he's doing anything over the top or something that doesn't feel realistic for him in summer league. Like, he's playing the way that you would hope that he would be able to play. It's not just as we pointed to in the last game, outliers shooting from three or whatever, which is what it felt like last year in summer league. Like that was the way he was getting his points. So I like the way that he's been scoring. There was a couple of plays that stood out to me that I thought showed that he was at least thinking his way through. And firstly, the lob off the backboard to himself for the two-hand dunk was pretty fun to see. But he had to think his way through that. And there was another play, I believe it was in the third quarter, it might have been the second quarter, where he was kind of in a semi-transition, hesitated around the free throw line, froze the defender, then went by and finished the layup as well. So he seems to be like thinking his way through. And as you pointed to, certainly looks confident. We had someone in the YouTube comments after the last podcast reference the fact that we were talking about the stats a little bit, but he's not necessarily going to be a player that the box score might not indicate whether he can be a positive player for this team. I think that's fair, because he isn't going to have the ball at the top of the key, and it's like, hey, get to the basket, as you pointed to. It might be his ability to stand up defensively, which is something I want to ask you about next, because there were some things that I was looking at with the way this team was defending, and they had some interesting lineups with the other two rookies, with Andre Jackson and Chris Livingston as well. So I want to ask you about Adrian Griffin next, because he's hinted to some of the things this team might do defensively. So we'll get to Adrian Griffin, Beauchamp, and the two rookies in just a little bit after I talk about Ibotta. After we do this podcast, I got to go do some grocery shopping, and I am highly not motivated about doing the grocery shopping, but it does make you feel a little bit better if you're with Ibotta, because Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop, and you can get cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 a year. That could cover an entire shopping trip, or you could use cash back to buy the flight you've been eyeing. Maybe not a flight to Australia, but that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving as well. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering listeners $5 just for trying the app. Use the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use the code LOCKED. That's IBOTTA. LOTTA in the Google Play Store or the App Store and use the code LOCKED. All right, the Summer League will continue to roll on this week. Tuesday night, the Bucks back in action, looking to stay undefeated. This time they are playing the Nets. I thought they were playing the Nets a few days ago, but they'll play the Nets in a couple of days' time, and we'll have a post-game show after that for sure. I also am going to do a podcast this week on Malik Beasley. I'm going to get someone to jump on the show that knows a little bit more about him and what he's done in his career. So we'll be talking about Malik Beasley because while we're focusing on Summer League, obviously there are some new faces on the Bucks roster as well. So we'll get to that. And Frank, I know you've got some
I hope it's not someone from the Lakers, because depending on where they saw Malik Beasley, you may get very different perceptions of his relative qualities. But I'm
going to the Minnesota days.
Okay, then you're gonna dial back to the glory days for Malik Beasley.
Right.
I was DMing with Daman Rangula, who Laker fan, the only likable Laker fan. He also has a major soft spot for Giannis. But I asked him, and he was just like, "Yeah, he's awful." And I was like, "Okay, well, okay, you had the downside experience with Malik Beasley. So hopefully we get, I guess Utah would be sort of in between, but hopefully we get more of the more vintage Malik Beasley performance, because we know he's not just useless. We know he has some really interesting qualities, especially his 3-point shooting. So anyway, yeah, Laker fans, if you're looking for negativity on Malik Beasley, talk to a Laker fan. If you're not, then don't talk to Lakers fans about him. But anyway, Adrian Griffin.
We are all about positivity here. So we're going back a few years when he made a whole stack of cash. Adrian Griffin, though. So this was at least noted, and it's funny to look at some of these Summer League teams, and they have assistants or younger members of the staff that are taking control of the Summer League team. We discussed it the other day. Adrian Griffin probably wants to sink his teeth into some of these young guys and get into the Summer League program with the guys that might be a part of the main roster. Terry Stotts is on the bench. Joe Prunty, the Prunster, is back on the sidelines as well. So as far as Summer League coaching staffs go, about as experienced as you can get in terms of the longevity, whether it's an assistant coach or a head coach. But he spoke about being aggressive defensively. He's mentioned the offensive glass a little bit. And I'm wondering if you're seeing anything, and clearly it's Summer League, but stylistically, you have to imagine that Adrian Griffin is going to want to be doing some things with this team that he might envision using in the regular season. And there's no question, we referenced it in the first game. There have been some moments where their defense maybe have been a little overly aggressive. We saw Andre Jackson Jr. had 8 fouls in the first game. I think Beauchamp had 6. They were able to wind that back a little bit in this game against Phoenix, but there was still a couple of possessions. And Jackson Jr. was the guy that did it a couple of times where he was really gambling defensively, looking for a steal, looking to take the ball the other way. And in theory, you might look at that. You have the defense on the back foot. You're basically playing 5-on-4 from that time out. The opposition was able to get pretty good shots. And then I'm looking at Adrian Griffin, and he's like fired up on the bench, and he's clapping, and he's not saying that that's a mistake. And it just, I saw that, and I thought that's kind of interesting, because in the other part of being super aggressive, the Bucks have always been a pretty good transition defense. And maybe this had more to do with the Phoenix Suns. But you get 3 offensive rebounds from Beauchamp, 5 from Jackson Jr., 3 from Tyler Cook, who we mentioned as well. So whether it's on the offensive glass or defensively, we're seeing some pretty aggressive stuff from this Bucks team.
Yeah, I mean, offensive rebounding, the Bud era Bucks leaned into offensive rebounding a lot more in the last couple of years. I mean, offensive rebounding was pretty key in some of the playoff series as well. I think, especially like the Atlanta series where they really tried to use their size. So, so I think offensive rebounding, Adrian Griffin's talked about that and the importance of that. I mean, that was really something that Toronto kind of felt like they had to do just because they were such a bad half-court offense. So offensive rebounding, transition, creating, transition via defense and forcing turnovers. Those were kind of, typical things that they do. And I think, Adrian Griffin has certainly alluded to those sorts of things here in Milwaukee, and certainly the difference, offensive rebound maybe would be similar, but taking chances, sending more help, that would obviously be different, especially last year where the Bucks, sent less help than previously, because I think previously the Bucks definitely helped on drives a lot, and we always talked about how that's one of the reasons why they gave up a lot of open threes. The Raptors bled open threes as much as any team in the league. They always gave up tons of open corner threes. And so that would be the downside of sort of, if that approach from Toronto that, certainly Adrian Griffin, it sounds like he wants to bring some of that to Milwaukee, is that the barrage of 3-pointers, which, we didn't see last year in Milwaukee, that may be back, unfortunately, but we'll see. But the Bucks were never a team that forced turnovers, even when they were giving up lots of threes. They never forced a lot of turnovers. They were always a team that, that was like the one thing that, the 4 factors on offense and defense. On defense, holding the other opponent to a low effective field goal percentage. Bucks were always generally pretty good at that, especially last year in the first 2 years of the Bud era. Not fouling, right? That was always a hallmark staple of the Bucks, is not giving away free points at the foul line. And defensive rebounding was obviously really a major point of emphasis too. Like don't allow second opportunities. But the last of the 4 factors, the turnover rate piece, was always sort of thing that they just didn't. They played a conservative drop style. They didn't necessarily do like lots of random double teaming. They didn't have guys jumping in the passing lanes. I think if you saw a rookie try to jump a passing lane and get caught behind the play because he went for a pickoff and he missed it. I feel like I can recall Jordan Wara, getting
the quick
hooks for that reason. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what if any carryover we see from Vegas also shows up in preseason. Honestly, like, I don't know really that there's a whole lot I'm gonna take from what we see here and say like, oh, this is indicative of the Bucks are definitely going to do this, or they're going to have Brook Lopez playing like this because Taco Fall is playing like that here in summer league. I think you can like ponder, like, are they playing Taco Fall because they're trying to simulate having like a big center like Brook or something like that? Like, maybe, I don't know. Like, that may be a question. Maybe that we'll ask Eric Name to bug Adrian Griffin with that question, or John Horst with that question at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of wait and see. Let's wait till training camp. Let's see kind of what they do in the preseason. And I think obviously we're kind of used to seeing the Bucks play a certain style. And again, to me, like, I think it's not so much like, oh, that, they're not going to play drop defense anymore. I think the question is, how many of those? Again, I always call it like having more pitches, like a baseball pitcher. Your defense, are you more frequently switching? Are you more frequently throwing zones out, or whatever other Nick Nurse era, Adrian Griffin era kind of funky stuff, boxing ones, that they would throw out, full court presses, things like that. So yeah, that's kind of I'll wait till preseason to kind of see if there's anything at that point that we see. I think with a bunch of young players who haven't had any chance to really play together, like, I don't know that I necessarily take a whole lot from this type of environment, but certainly, like, hey, yesterday they give up 50 points in the first half, and then you saw the kind of energy intensity ramp up in the second half, forcing turnovers, offensive rebounding, etc., and allow only 25 points the second half. Like, it's a good thing. Certainly winning games, playing good defense in summer league, never a bad thing. How much that tells us about the regular season Bucks, let's wait till we see guys that are actually going to play rotation minutes, because at least so far I'm still not sold that any of the guys that are playing right now are going to be mainstays in the rotation. Hopefully MarJon Beauchamp principally, I would love it if he can carve out a rotation role for himself this year. But like what I would say, you don't earn regular season minutes in July, so it's again one step at a time.
And I will say this: I mean, you mentioned the defensive intensity after halftime. We saw the same in the first game. But as far as summer league basketball goes, the way that the Bucks clearly targeted guys in the draft that are athletic and can play defense and perhaps are defensively minded, with Beauchamp, Livingston, and Jackson on the floor, like, it's been pretty fun when they do ramp it up. As far as summer league, the intensity defensively maybe not always there. So I've certainly found it pretty entertaining. And as far as Jackson Jr. goes, no threes in this game. We know he was 0 for 4. There was a couple of times in the first game where he was kind of baited into shooting those threes. He didn't take them in this game, and I think he was called for a travel there at one point, and the announcers were saying, well, he probably should have taken that shot. I'm not sure whether he needed to, but we have seen in the half court that he's a pretty creative passer. We've seen some nice passes, even if it's just a basic passer, like a skip pass across the entire floor to MarJon Beauchamp there a couple of times. Like, he's got pretty good vision for a guy that, he's not a point guard, but can he handle the ball a little bit? I guess we'll wait and see. I think he's going to find himself, if he's on the floor with some space on the perimeter, I think that's a safe bet. So Andre Jackson Jr., some nice stuff there as well. Let's talk about Chris Livingston next, though, Frank. Over the last couple of days since we podcasted, it was announced that he's signed a deal as well. Kind of expected this was coming, but we'll get into that, and you can run through the numbers next. Chris Livingston, the last pick in the draft this year, a 4-year, $7.7 million rookie deal. Shams Charania reported that a couple of days ago here. So the first 2 years are guaranteed. Nothing too crazy here, but I think that as we were going through the roster and the number of guaranteed contracts the Bucks had, they also announced officially Jay Crowder coming back to the Bucks as well here in the last little bit. So to me, I just had it penciled down because of the report that came out on draft night that Livingston did not attend some workouts with some teams, and there was a team that promised him he was going to come, and I just didn't think that they would go to all that length for a two-way deal. So I thought he was going to be on the main roster. But what does the numbers mean? What does this mean? Is there anything interesting in this contract signing as a second-round player?
Yeah, so the one, I think, we've talked about a little bit, the one thing that the new CBA brought that actually helps high spending teams, helps all teams, but especially useful, I think, to teams that are well into the tax, like the Bucks. Previously, in order to sign guys for more than 2 years, your second round picks, right? Your first round picks, you have kind of existing first round exceptions. There's the first round scale, and so those contracts are set, regardless of where you are cap wise. But previously, if you wanted to give a second round pick more than a 2-year minimum deal, you needed an exception to do that. Could be the mid-level exception, taxpayer or non-taxpayer. Typically Bucks, back in the day, right? Like I remember Lupa Mute when I first started kind of really following the cap stuff, like, they gave him, I think, a 3-year contract, right? And they paid him a little bit more to kind of keep him off the market. And the advantage of doing that was you had 3 years. Usually you have some non-guarantee stuff in there to kind of protect the team if the guy washes out. But then after 3 years, they would hit restricted free agency. So you kind of got them for 3 years being, longer than 2 years. So you didn't have to pay them after 2 years if they were good. You get 3 full years. And then even after the third year, they're still going to be a restricted free agent. You kind of have some cost control. Problem is, if you're a team like the Bucks and what we saw the last few years, they really weren't in a position to typically do that. So you saw these 2-year minimum contracts with varying levels of guarantees, which, Bucks were happy to do that because they were trying to keep their salary cap numbers down as well. But one of the interesting things about the new cap or the new CBA is that it allows teams like the Bucks and every other team to sign their second round picks for 3 or 4 years with a team option on the last year, using an entirely separate exception. So you don't need any, you don't need a taxpayer mid-level, which the Bucks don't have, in order to sign these multiple guys. And the upside is you can pay them also more than the minimum on these deals, even if you don't have one of these other exceptions. And so I think what you'll see, the $7.7 million number. So the 4-year version of this sort of like complete minimum contract adds up to a little over 7.6 million. So there may be a little bit extra money that they're giving to Chris Livingston. I would imagine Andre Jackson probably has a little bit more than Chris Livingston because he was picked, 22 spots higher. But the first year in particular, just given where the Bucks are in the tax, not surprising. I don't think the Bucks are going to pay as much as possible with that exception, which would be, I think, like around 1 point. I think actually Andre Jackson with the 4-year deal, I think you could get basically a little over 2 million, basically the second year, basically the equivalent of what a guy with 2 years of service can get for a contract. So I would expect, though, that they're probably going to be closer to that true, quote unquote, true rookie minimum, which is like 1.2 million in the first year. And then it goes up over 2 million in the last couple of years of the deal. And the last year can be a team option. And, again, we'll see with Livingston in particular, like how much kind of, non-guarantee is there. Did they say, I'm trying to remember, Kane, did they say only the first 2 years are guaranteed? I'm trying. Yeah. Okay. So, and that's part of why, he's gotten the most money of any like last pick in a draft, right? First of all, he's the 58th pick because 2 teams lost second round picks this year. So he's not the 60th pick. He's the 58th pick. But the reason why he's getting paid this money is a couple of things. One, there's this exception now out there, so the Bucks can actually do this and actually, not have to use another exception, and they can pay him very little in year 1, which it seems like they are doing to help their kind of cap and tax situation. And then again, that 4th year team option, probably some non-guarantee money in year 3, and so they have some options. Again, if he washes out after 2 years, then they can get out of the contract. If he, after 3 years, actually like becomes a star, then we've seen this where teams will actually decline a cheap 4th year option because they want to re-sign the guy before he hits unrestricted free agency. And so after 4 years, you'd be an unrestricted free agent. After 3 years, you'd be a restricted free agent. So there's kind of just some games like that they can play. Obviously, if they have to do that with Chris Livingston and pay him a ton of money, that would be the most wonderful problem to have.
Exactly.
I think with the 58th pick, he's looked okay in Vegas. Like, I think he's got some physical tools. Again, he's hit a couple threes. Is he bad at anything? Like, I don't know if he's bad at anything, but I don't, nothing's really, I think, also kind of really popped. But obviously they made him a promise, take him at 58. I'm sure that there was an understanding with Clutch that they were going to give him this contract. That's why he shut down all those workouts. That's why he was happy to just go 58 to the Bucks. And so now the question is, does that scouting, were the Bucks right, and can they develop him under Adrian Griffin and this new staff? So fingers crossed that you get a diamond in the rough here with Chris Livingston, Andre Jackson as well. But again, I'll be the Grinch that stole summer league. Kane, the reality obviously is that these guys typically do not end up panning out, or honestly, a lot of times if they do, it's oftentimes not with the first team that they are drafted by, right? A lot of times guys have to kind of go to a couple teams before they sometimes figure stuff out. But again, Bucks really need a hit. MarJon Beauchamp, probably the first most likely guy to hit. But if you can get 2 of these guys kind of from this draft class, plus MarJon, 2 of those guys to pan out and be like actual, like, solid to good NBA players, like from where you pick these guys, like that would be great.
It certainly would. And I mentioned the depth chart. Obviously, we've gone through this and it was in theory before. But now if you include AJ Green with that deal and Chris Livingston and Andre Jackson that they've all made official, by my count, they're at 14 with Thanasis in theory being the 15th guy. So I think that's right. That's what I have in front of me anyway. So, it's at least interesting with those rookies getting the deal on the main roster, and obviously AJ Green coming up. Speaking of AJ Green, you mentioned Eric Name earlier, but he did say, he did tweet this out a few hours ago now that Green's been out with right ankle soreness, Lindell Wigginton with left groin soreness, but it certainly seems like AJ Green is going to play against the Nets on Tuesday there. So, you figure he'll come in, and depending on his health, he might start, and you might have 4 of the guys that are on the main roster on the floor at the same time, which is, I have to imagine, certainly for contending teams, you don't see that every day. I know they were talking on the broadcast a little bit about the fact that the Bucks definitely have all this rotation minutes that people can get, and they were talking about Tyler Cook and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure they had a close. I'm not sure they had a close look at the Bucks roster. And he was great again, by the way.
Yeah, Tyler Cook's been really impressive. I mean, like they went back to Taco Fall in the 4th quarter. I was bemoaning the spamming of Nico Mannion Taco Fall 2-man games in the 4th quarter. That's partly why MarJon didn't score, because he wasn't touching the ball. And Nico Mannion was 2 for 14 in this game. So it was kind of like, all right, like I'm kind of good with this. So, I mean, the irony was like, I don't even really care that much if Lindell and AJ don't even play, because I don't know. Part of it is I kind of feel like I kind of know what those guys are.
Sure.
But part of it's too is just it's like Amari Moore has barely played. I mean, he's the one new guy that you have officially given a 2-way to. He hasn't scored a bucket. He's played 13 minutes in 2 games, and I think he's 0 for 3 or something. Hasn't even scored a point. Meanwhile, you've got Nico Mannion playing 25 to 27 minutes every night, even though he's not going to be on the roster. And Gortman, I think, has shown nice flashes. I'm certainly would be happy if he gets the two-way, which was rumored, but apparently didn't actually happen yet. So I've liked what I've seen from Gortman. He has some swagger, some spunk. He got a technical for taunting in this game. I think he was only 2 for 9, but hit a long three. And I don't know, something about him just kind of pops. He's he's got some athletic tools. He definitely has kind of a defensive peskiness to him. So I like what I've seen from him. Certainly, he's distinguished himself much more than Moore has. Who, even though we talked about him, I mean, Moore I think profiled really well as kind of this like tall kind of lead guard type guy. But so far we haven't seen it. And unfortunately, like if AJ Green starts getting minutes too, it's like, well, is fucking Amari Moore gonna play? Like, are they gonna bench they're the only guy they've actually given an official two-way to? For these last couple of games or something like that. I certainly hope not. So anyway, yeah, I mean, if they want to just, DNP rest Nico Mannion and Taco Fall for that matter, these last couple of games, I would certainly be all for that, because I don't know what it helps the Milwaukee Bucks franchise as far as giving those guys minutes. I don't think they're, making MarJon Beauchamp better or something like that. So, even if it reduces the likelihood of winning games, whatever, right? I'd rather go down, swinging with guys that actually need some reps and that, might have a future on the roster. So that is my official anti Nico Mannion Taco Fall diatribe. Although I will say, I mean, I didn't realize this until I heard it in the game, but Nico Mannion's dad played for the Bucks in the 80s. Pace Mannion had I called him had a kind of a classic 80s dirtbag look. Kind of like skeezy mustache, kind of little curly blonde hair, wore number 3.
Nice.
I don't know. He I don't know, looks like he could have been an extra from Roadhouse or something, but yeah, it's funny these the kind of the Bucks connections that you occasionally see with these guys. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't really know what these non-roster, non-two-way guys are going to give us in terms of what we're going to learn. But anyway, that's my soapbox moment here for tonight's episode, Kane.
We like it. We're here to see the guys that are on the roster. That's why we're watching this summer league basketball. I'm with you. And by the way, we mentioned Nico Mannion actually had a pretty nice game in the first one against Denver, but overall now he's 1 for 15 from 3 across the 2 games. So it's been kind of nasty from the outside, and he's not shy.
Yeah, I mean, I think he shot like 37% from 3 in Europe the last couple of years. I mean, he's clearly a much better shooter than this, but not helping right now.
All right, that'll do it for today. But let us know what you thought about Game 2 of the Bucks in Vegas. MarJon Beauchamp and his development. I know the YouTube comments, they are fired up about MarJon Beauchamp right now. Maybe some comments going a little bit too far with what's we've seen so far. And I'm very optimistic. We hope that, as you mentioned, one of these guys or a couple of these guys can actually find their way in the rotation, because they're certainly fun to watch, and you love the athleticism of these young guys that we're seeing so far. So let us know what you thought about that. The Livingston deal. Adrian Griffin, have you seen anything from him across the first 2 games as well? So plenty to discuss. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Malik Beasley in the next couple of days. The Bucks and the Nets coming up in Summer League as well. The Bucks looking to stay undefeated. We're here watching the games. They may as well go ahead and win the Summer League title. That's what we're hoping for here as well. But keep it with us on Locked On Bucks, and continue to support the show. We really appreciate it. We'll speak to you all tomorrow.